This is a code walkthrough for the example file LoopingForEndPrinting.java. So let's open up this file in JGrasp and take a look. The overall purpose of this file is to show how we might use selection within a for loop to selectively print messages for certain outputs but not for others. So let's do this. Let's resize this window so we can see our output. Let's compile this file and we will free run it and look at this output. What we see here is the output from a for loop. We're printing the numbers from 1 to 20, and then we're trying to find the numbers which are multiples of some other number, in this case 3. And for each multiple of 3, we're printing out a message only for those numbers within the for loop. But there's another wrinkle here as well. For the first such multiple of 3, we're printing out a different message only on the first time and not for all the other ones. So now let's resize this window back to roughly 50-50 and go over this code a little bit. Let me make the window a little bit bigger so that we can see all the code at once. The guts of this code is this for loop right here. We're going to loop from 1 to this limit of 20, and we're going to print not by using println, but we're going to print using printf, which keeps the output cursor on the same line. So after we've printed our numbers out using this format, we're going to go through these 3 logic cases of selection, and if the index I is evenly divisible by our factor of 3, we're going to use the modulus operator for that. If that modulus is equal to 0, this number is evenly divisible by 3, we're going to print out some message. Now, on the first time through, we're going to print this specific message. For all of the other times, we're going to print this other message. Again, notice that each of these prints don't kick the output down to the next line because we're using print, not println, to do the printing. How does this work? Well, if we want to print something only one time, we're going to set this Boolean variable first. We're going to set its initial value to false. Then when we encounter this if case for the first time, first is false, so the not of that is true, and we'll print this out one time and one time only. We'll then toggle this Boolean variable. It's going to be like a software latch, and once it becomes true, this case will never again be satisfied, so we will never make this print again. Thereafter, when we find another value that's evenly divisible by 3, this Boolean will always be true, and for the second and subsequent occurrences of that multiple, we're going to print this out instead. In all cases, after we've printed the number out, we're going to print out a new line using this system.out.println. So the key thing to notice here is that when we print, we don't kick it down as a new line, we only do that as an end. And in between here, we've got this selective printing going on. Okay, now let's go through this code a little bit slower using the debugger. So let's resize this window so that we can see a little more of the output. I'm going to clear the output, and then as always, we start with a compiled piece of code. I'm going to click on the margin and set a breakpoint on the main method, and then instead of clicking the run icon, I'm going to click the debug icon, and now we can start single stepping through this code and looking at it line by line. So we're setting up the looping limit of 20, the factor of 3, and notice that we could imagine that these were prompted from the user, but in this case we're going to just hardwire them. Next, we set this latch variable that we spoke about, and we'll set its initial value to false. Then we're going to enter the for loop, and we're going to go through this 20 times. So as we said, we're going to print using printf, so that's going to keep the cursor at the end of the previous print, and then we're going to go into this first if, and I'm going to resize this a little bit so that we can see a little bit more here. But right now I is equal to 1, so that is not a multiple of 3, so we're going to skip this case because this modulus does not equal 0, and for the same reason we're going to skip this one, and we're going to print the new line now. Same thing for 2. Now the index is 3, so we're going to print out the 3, keeping the cursor right after the 3, and now we're going to check the modulus. Now the modulus, when dividing 3 by 3, is going to be 0. It's evenly divisible, and the value of first is equal to false, so the not of that is true. So this entire condition is true for one time and one time only. So we'll enter this if branch. We're going to print this one-time message. We're going to toggle the software latch, and it's going to become true. And then we'll go down here and do the println to the new line, and then we'll come back around. 4, 5. Now we're on I equals 6, and notice that even though this test is true, this other one will always be false because the not of true is always going to be false. So we're never again going to execute this branch, but we will execute this branch because this Boolean is always going to be true. So when we have an even divisibility by 3, we're going to do this print now, and then follow it up with a new line. Okay, and then again we're going to print 7, 8 divisible by 3, so we get a message. 10, 11, 12, we'll get the message again. 13, 14, 15, get the message again. 16, 17, 18, this will be true one last time. So we'll print the message, print the new line. 19, 20, and we are now done. So that's how this code works. And again, the key idea is that if we want to print something out conditionally, we don't use a println, which would kick the output down to the next line. We instead use printf or print, and then we can splice in some kind of conditional logic, and then only after we've done that do we print a new line and kick it down to the next line. If we want to do something only one time, we can create a compound condition, and we can use some sort of Boolean latching variable, something like this, where we toggle it so it only runs one time, and we'll only see this message one time. And of course, that gives us the same output that we saw before. So that's how this code works.